Okay, so today we're going to be talking about completing the square. So this is a topic we've kind of already discussed. We're going to be rewriting our equation into this form. And then we're going to be doing some of these steps, and we'll get to that a little later, in order to create a perfect square trinomial. So the key steps that we will need to know how to do are completing the square and factoring a perfect square trinomial. Okay, so we need to start by figuring out how to complete the square. So we're given two numbers. We want to figure out what number we need to add in order to create a perfect square trinomial. So we look at the number in front of x. We take that number, divide it by 2, and square it. So 22 divided by 2 is 11. And 11 squared is 121. So that's the number that we can add that will create a perfect square trinomial here. This is completing my square. Same thing for the second one, x squared minus 18x plus blank. So again, taking the number that's in front of x, dividing it by 2, and squaring it. So in this case, negative 9 squared will give me 81. So the number that I can add to create a perfect square trinomial is 81. The second part to this is factoring each perfect square trinomial in the problem. So now that I actually have written a perfect square trinomial, I want to factor it down into a binomial squared. So for the first one, x squared plus 22x plus 121, when we factor this, it ends up being the same binomial, the same exact binomial, because the two numbers that multiply to give me 121 and add to give me 11, or I'm sorry, add to give me 22, are positive 11 and positive 11. So since it's the same binomial, we rewrite it as that binomial squared. That's just saying the binomial multiplied times itself. That's all that the squared symbol means. Okay, so x plus 11 times x plus 11, that's the same thing as x plus 11 squared. And then we're doing the same thing for the second one, x squared minus 18x plus 81. If I rewrite this as two binomials, it's x minus 9 and x minus 9. So for perfect square trinomials, we write it as the binomial squared. And the number that is going to be in your binomial, it's going to come straight from whatever this number is. The constant, if we take the square root of the constant, that'll give us that number. In order to figure out if we do a plus or a minus sign, we look at what's in front of the x. If it's a minus, that means that our binomial will also have a minus sign. If it's a plus, like in our first example, our binomial will also have a plus symbol. And make sure that you do the U-try problems. Okay, so now we are actually going to complete the square. So I start by taking my function here, and I need to move the constant to the right side. So in order to move a positive 6, I am going to subtract 6 from both sides. So I end up with 3x squared minus 12x equals negative 6. Next, I need to get rid of the number in front of x squared, and I do that by dividing by it. That'll cancel that 3 out, so I get x squared minus 4x equals negative 2. And then my next step is to actually complete the square, and I do that by adding the number in front of x divided by 2 squared. So I take negative 4 divided by 2 squared, and that gives me 4. So that's the number that I add to both sides. So I'm adding 4 to the left and adding 4 to the right. So again, just taking the number in front of x, divide it by 2, and then square it. So negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2, squared is positive 4. And I add that number to both sides of my equation. So I end up with x squared minus 4x plus 4 is equal to 2. My next step is to factor my perfect square trinomial. So when I factor this, it's going to be a binomial squared. And that binomial is going to be x minus 2. Just take the number in front of x and divide it by 2. That'll give me the number that I put into my binomial. My next step is to find the square root. So I want to get rid of the squared symbol. In order to do that, I square root the left side, and I'm going to square root the right side. Okay, so when I do that, I end up with x minus 2. I no longer have the squared, and plus or minus the square root of 2. And then my last step is to add 2 to both sides. So I end up with x is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. And here are a couple try problems for you to try yourself at home. Okay, and then here are a couple examples of how we can use completing the square to change from quadratic to vertex form, which we have actually already done in class. So what is y equals x squared plus 4x minus 6 in vertex form? We're going to name the vertex and the y-intercept. Okay, so we are going to start by kind of moving the minus 6 off to the side. We have x squared plus 4x. We're going to be filling some things in here, so we're going to move this minus 6 over. Next, if I had a number in front of my x squared, I would factor it out of the 2 terms that have x's in them. But since I don't have a number in front of the x squared, I'm actually going to just go ahead and complete the square. So I will have y equals x squared plus 4x. And then I am going to complete the square by taking the number in front of x divided by 2. I'm going to do this off to the side here. And squaring it. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, squared gives me 4. So that's the number that I'm going to be adding to the inside here. And then if I've added 4, I also need to balance the equation by subtracting 4. And I bring down the minus 6. Okay, and then I'm going to simplify these numbers, adding negative 4 and a negative 6. So we have x squared, we have x squared plus 4x plus 4, and then minus 10 on the outside here. And then finally I just need to take this, the trinomial, and write it as a binomial squared. It's a perfect squared trinomial, so all I'm going to do is take x. It's going to be a plus sign because I have a plus sign in front of my x term here. And then it's just whatever the square root of this number is. So 2 squared. And then I bring down the minus 10. So this is now went from standard form to vertex form. So a second example of that, we've got negative x squared minus 2x plus 3. So what I need to do here is start by moving my constant off to the side here. So again, the plus 3, we're moving it away because we're going to be filling some things in here. Next, I need to factor out the negative symbol. I want the x squared to be by itself, so right now there's a negative 1 in front of it. So what I'm going to do is take the negative 1 out. So I take x squared divided by the negative 1, I get x squared. And negative 2x divided by negative 1 is now a positive 2x. Okay, and move the plus 3 a little bit more out here. Okay, so now I have my x squared and my x. I can now complete my square. So that means that I am going to take the number in front of x, which in this case it's a 2. I divide it by 2 and I square it. So that is going to equal 1. That's going to be the number that I add to the inside. And then I'm going to need to balance the equation. So I didn't actually plus 1 here. I know I wrote plus 1 inside the parentheses, but when I distribute the negative 1 that's on the outside, negative 1 times 1 is negative 1, right? The negative 1 that's right here in front of the parentheses. Negative 1, when I distribute that to the 1, negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. So what I ended up doing was I actually subtracted 1. So on the outside, I am going to add 1. Okay? Whatever you had on the inside, you need to, whatever you had on the inside, you need to make sure that you distribute the number on the outside. If there's not a number on the outside, like up here, we didn't have a number on the outside, so all we had to do was plus 4 on the inside, minus 4 on the outside. So, they would end up canceling out. For this one, though, negative 1 times 1 means we actually subtracted 1, so we need to add 1 to balance the equation. So now we are going to get rid of this. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and combine like terms. The numbers on the outside, I can combine those, plus 1 and plus 3. So when I add those two together, 1 plus 3 is going to make that a plus 4 now. And then finally, I just need to write my trinomial as a binomial squared. So I'm going to change the x squared plus 2x plus 1 into a binomial. And to do that, I know it's going to be x plus, I know it's a plus sign because it's a plus sign in front of the 2x. And then I just take the square root of whatever this number is. So it's going to be a plus 1 squared. And then I bring down my plus 4. And that's it. And here are some you-try problems. And if you bring the second one into me tomorrow and it is correct, I will give you extra credit.